Not an extremely busy trade deadline day for the Vancouver Canucks. David Quadrelli, alongside Chris Faber, here for CanucksArmy at Rogers Arena, just spoke with Patrik Allvin, and he had some interesting things to say about the Canucks' decisions today.
Yeah, absolutely. Not a very busy day. Tyler Motte being the only player traded out in return for a fourth-round pick in the 2023 draft. Felt like all the business got done prior to the deadline, and we saw the Canucks make some pretty good moves, shedding salary cap with Travis Hamonic leaving on the books and bringing in Travis Dermott to replace him on the back end, a little bit cheaper, a little bit younger, a little bit of a better skater. Some upside there to Dermott.
When it comes to Travis Dermott, what are the Canucks getting in this player?
I think they're getting some versatility, a guy who is a left-shot defenseman who can play both sides, a little bit younger. Talked about it a little bit this morning on Sportsnet Radio, saying that he's confident in his skating, and that's going to be the thing that's going to help him as he moves to a new team here in Vancouver.
When we look at this team's goaltending situation, it's very clear that Thatcher Demko is this team's starter. Jaro Halak, he struggled at various points this year, has the no-move clause. Patrik Allvin deciding not to comment if the Canucks asked him to waive the no-move clause. Are you surprised that the Canucks kept Jaroslav Halak today?
I wouldn't say surprised because of that bonus. It is a little bit of a knock on the Canucks' salary cap for next year to have that 1.5 or 1.25, depending on how the save percentage finishes out for the season. But it is unfortunate to not be able to move that money away when I believe the team was attempting to move on from Halak.
Tyler Motte for a fourth. That's the trade that everybody's talking about. It's really the only trade the Canucks made that is of a lot of value to this organization that people are looking at. New York Rangers get him for a fourth-round pick. Are you surprised by that return at all?
I'm surprised by the return a little bit. I'm happy that there was a return in the end. I think that's a difference between the prior management to what we see now with Patrik Allvin being at the head of that as well as Jim Rutherford. And I do think that getting a return for a player that isn't going to be back on this roster next year is a good thing for the Vancouver Canucks. It might not be the second-round pick that so many people were hoping for, but to get a piece back, I mean, Jack Rathbone was found in a fourth-round pick. This scouting staff has done a pretty good job with their picks from the 4th to 7th round. I think adding a player like that to your prospect pool, hopefully a defenseman, will be nice to see. And it's a good return in the end to get something rather than nothing.
Now, Allvin did mention that the Canucks and Motte could not come to an agreement on a contract extension, and that's ultimately why we saw Motte move on. If you're putting yourself in the shoes of Tyler Motte and the organization, how far apart do you think they were?
In my eyes, I do believe that Motte's camp was looking over 2.5, and I think that's what they're going to look for in free agency as well. I can't see the Canucks being very comfortable going over 2, so I'm going to guess that they're about $500,000 apart on that aspect.
Just to correct myself from something earlier, I said Motte was the only one that mattered. I meant today. The big one yesterday, of course, Travis Hamonic to Ottawa for a third. Of course, that clears up room for Travis Dermott to come through. Overall, a good swap, but how surprised were you to see Travis Hamonic go to Ottawa for a third, no salary retained?
I was very surprised. A great trade for the Vancouver Canucks, and it was a good way to secure up some cap space, not only for this year, but let's not forget that there was a $3 million cap hit on next year as well. So overall, a pretty good weekend, I would have to say. Maybe didn't live up to expectations for a lot of Canucks fans who were hoping for a lot of moves, but a couple other interesting notes from Patrik Allvin and his media availability. Nils Höglander doesn't look like he's going to be on the road trip with this team, so that groin injury looks like it's going to be hurting him for the time being. And asked about NCAA prospect Aidan McDonough, it sounds like the Canucks are going to make a push for him, but Allvin ultimately said that it is up to the player to make a decision on what his future is going to be.
Finally, Patrik Allvin was asked about Connor Garland and Brock Boeser, the two big names that were kind of floated out there, and he said, I'm happy those guys are on our team. I think a lot of Canucks fans can kind of agree with that, but do you feel at all that this is just pushing the problem further down the road and the Canucks are going to have to address this in the offseason and move one of these guys?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a problem because both these players are going to have value. When you get to the trade deadline, you think that maybe an option for a trade is going to come up, but there is definitely an option in the summer and potentially even more teams interested in these type of players. When you can move around some salary cap, more draft picks, you know where you're picking in the draft. It's going to be interesting to see where these players shake down, but I would be surprised to see both of these players, in Garland and Boeser, both on the opening night roster for the 2022-23 season.
All in all, pretty successful trade deadline for the Vancouver Canucks. Thanks for doing this. David Quadrelli, Chris Faber for CanucksArmy.